Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my limited podcast series on the 12 signs of the Zodiac. My name is Brie Rhiannon. Thank you so much for joining this podcast series as I explain the 12 signs of the Zodiac my way, which is through the lens of the spectrums of frequency and science, as well as applying the laws of physics, quantum physics theories, quantum mechanics, electrical engineering theories like polarity, mechanical engineering theories to astrology and the construction of the Zodiac wheel. Just through my own career and jobs that I have had, I spent the last 5 years in something called test and measurement, which is helping engineers across all industries, but I had a pretty heavy focus in aerospace and renewable energy and battery and things like that. So I started to apply all of these engineering principles and theories to astrology because I also happen to be a second generation astrologer. I grew up with my mom being a professional astrologer, and she's also a sound healer now, which is also based in quantum physics and the fact that the body is made out of mostly water and how we respond to water at the cellular level. So I just have really heavy pattern recognition skills and started to connect a lot of dots in my brain. And now here we are. So as I go through these 12 signs of the Zodiac, I'm really talking about them by axis. Even though each one has their own separate episode, we have to learn the construction of the Zodiac wheel through the construction by axis, because that is where you really see the polarity. But also today being Taurus is great because jumping from Aries in the first house to Taurus, you also see the polarity there. So I will kind of dive into how you see the equal and opposite reaction of that laws of physics while you're building not just through the axis, but through the entire Zodiac wheel as well. And then I also have on my green dress today. I will post pictures on my social media to show what these outfits really look like, but I am dressing in theme for each sign of the Zodiac. So today I have on my favorite green dress. It's very, very comfortable and stretchy. I actually majored in fashion merchandising, so I just spent a long time in the fashion industry. I used to be a stylist and things like that, so I love me some clothes. And with Taurus being the very, very first earth sign out of the Zodiac wheel, I always refer to Taurus as the earthiest of earth signs. People with Taurus placements tend to have that green thumb. They tend to, be gravitating towards doing things like gardening, and they're good at it. Things that I am not good at and wish I was good at, because all of my earth energy is Capricorn, and I always joke that Capricorn is like the least earthy of earth signs, being the last one in the 10th house and being all high frequency, and it's kind of a little bit less grounded than you're used to. So Taurus is that very, very earth-based second house energy. So what I'm really going to be doing when we dive into things is teaching you astrology through building blocks, because astrology can feel like a lot, right? It can feel very, very daunting, and it can feel like, oh my gosh, there's 12 signs. They have all these rulerships. I don't know how to figure out all those associations and definitions. And I promise it is not that hard. And especially when we are learning the 12 signs of the Zodiac through axis, as well as just the overall construction of the Zodiac wheel. So you take what those building blocks are of the rulerships, which is the house, the planet, the element, the mode, and the symbol, and you can stack those on top of each other. And as I talk about them, you will see how they're all really associated, and they all evoke the energy of that sign of the Zodiac that you are trying to learn. And then at the end, what we will do is go over what are seen as like by pop astrology as like strengths and weaknesses, but we really need to understand the duality of each of these signs, and that strengths and weaknesses are really just human assignments of perspective. Anything that we see as good or bad, we can all seek and find additional information, flip that perspective over, and whatever we see as good, we can see it as bad, and whatever we see as bad, we can see it as good. So I always say duality is really understanding that nothing is really good or bad. Nothing is a strength or a weakness. Everything just is. So Also, when these energies go into detriment or dissonance, which is how we will view things as weaknesses through the human assignment of perspective, we can also understand how the energy can become grounded in the other end of the axis to become, more efficient and perform more optimally and go back into resonance or back into the strength version of the energy over the weakness. So let's dive into it. Obviously, we are on Taurus today. So when you're constructing the zodiac wheel, and we can go back to that Aries episode and listen to that first house energy, the ascendant on the birth chart and everything like that, I also was talking about how the laws of physics are contained in astrology. And when we move from the first house to the second house, we can actually see the exact same equal and opposite reaction and polarity that we see through the Aries Libra axis. So that's the first and the seventh house. And remember, that was Mars and Venus, and we are taking the gendered assignments out of the way that we view this energy because we are turning this mechanical. Even though this energy is intangible, like your Wi-Fi signal or your GPS, it does still contain movement. So what we were saying is that Mars is a projective energy, that the direction of the energy is moving out and away from you. And then Venus on the other end of that axis with Aries and Libra is the receptive energy. And that's like the plus and the minus on the battery, but it's also the equal and opposite reaction of the laws of physics that gets contained within the polarity living in this physical world. I also want to point out that this world is a binary world, not just the human system with a binary brain, left versus right, 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 feet. Also the earth itself, because we are talking about the first earth sign, is still a polar world. We have a north and a south pole, a north and a south hemisphere. So this is still this like polar binary viewpoint, right? So you actually see that equal and opposite reaction moving from the first sign of the zodiac within Aries to the second sign of the zodiac within Taurus, because Aries, ruled by Mars, that projective sign, the plus on the battery, you move to the second house and you get Taurus, which happens to also be ruled by Venus. So there you see that as we move through the signs and the houses, constructing the zodiac wheel through axis, we contain that plus and the minus on the battery. We contain that equal and opposite reaction moving from the first house to the second house. And it's very easy for the brain to conceptualize knowing what Mars represents and knowing what Venus represents. So we're already moving through that polarity again right away. So talking about the building blocks of this and starting with the second house. So what is the second house, and what is all of the assignments and definitions and the frequency spectrum of what is contained in the second house? Because the thing is that when you learn astrology and when you're looking at your own birth chart, not every second house is going to be ruled by Taurus. Your birth time is where you get these differences, because your birth time defines the ascendant, which again, we talked about in the Aries episode of how Aries is that moment that the soul gets encapsulated in the physical body, which is why the first house is representative of the physical body and your physical appearance. So your ascendant changes based off of your birth time. For example, my personal ascendant, I'm a Capricorn ascendant. So my first house is ruled by Capricorn, and also by degree it goes into Aquarius, and my second house is actually ruled by Pisces energy. So the second house, whatever your houses are, they are ending up being ruled by different signs of the zodiac. So this is why you're learning by these building blocks, is because the second house and the first house, all your houses will always be the same definitions of rulership, but then they will change based on your birth time and your ascendant, and you're adding the flavor of the different signs of the zodiac into those houses, okay? So that's something that's really important to understand, that as we build these building blocks through each sign of the zodiac, through the traditional zodiac wheel in which Aries is always ruling the first house and Taurus is always ruling the second house, and so on and so forth, we know that these definitions of houses do not change. It's the signs that change through them based on our own personal birth chart, and that is how astrology becomes so personal. Anyway, so the second house is the house of what we call external resources, okay? So what are external resources? The easiest way to really think about this before we graduate to higher conceptual levels becomes what is known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we're moving from the first house, which is just the house of identity, us, who we are, our personality, our physical appearance, our physical body, the energy that people get from us when they first meet us, right? And then we're moving through life, we're graduating through life, and that's what the zodiac wheel is really defining. So the next part of life that we interact with in the second house are the pieces of energy that exist externally outside of us that we need not only just to survive, but also to thrive. And that's when you graduate like above Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that pyramid of, do you have water? Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Do you have all of these things that you need in order to literally just stay alive as a living being on Earth? So do you see why we get that also ruling element of Earth in the second house when it comes to Taurus? Because here we are just talking and explaining what is represented in all of this energy, and we're saying how to survive on Earth, but also how to thrive on Earth. Because once you have food, water, shelter, clothing, and you are good to go and you're staying alive, then it becomes about thriving. So it becomes about fulfillment. So also the second house is the energy of what really like fills our cup up, right? So how are you fulfilled? And that is the graduation after the first house, because in the first house within Aries, we also got that assignment of purpose, inner flame, the spark of life, passion. What did I come here to do? So then we're moving into the second house, and that equal and opposite reaction of the second house is looking at the first house, and it's this exploration of polarity. What did I come here to do? And then how am I going to receive? So see how the first house was projective and we graduated to the second house and it automatically has to become receptive, is how am I going to receive for what I do? How am I going to be fulfilled for what I do contained in the first house? So understanding the house itself already also gave us some of our other building blocks of the element of Earth, simply describing what we are interacting with and what we are exploring in the energy of this house. So this is the first house also that rules money. There's multiple houses that rule money, but we can also call it the first house that rules abundance is the second house. What is abundance energy? Because humans have gotten this a little bit skewed and a little bit lost, and it's almost like we've forgotten what abundance energy truly is because we're living in this world of late stage capitalism, right? And abundance, yes, money is involved. Yes, money is contained in the energy of abundance. Money has really just become the physical assignment of abundance energy down here in the Earth human realm that we have decided to become the most obsessed with and the most focused on. However, abundance is more than that. So take it back to that phrase that I said of what fulfills you, what helps you thrive, what fills your cup. That's the Taurus energy in the second house here, okay? So that is happiness, joy, fulfillment. What makes you feel grateful, gives you gratitude. That is contained in the second house energy. Whatever you want to receive for doing the things that you do in life. So also exploring kind of like the shadow side of abundance is the opposite of that. So it's like, what is the opposite of all of that? That's, if we're going from safety and security and fulfillment, the opposite side is scarcity, lack, fear, and anxiety, right? So it's like that is still contained in the second house because we're talking about, well, what do I gain? What do I get? What do I receive for doing what I'm supposed to do, for fulfilling my purpose? After I'm surviving, how am I thriving? But the shadow side of this energy that we need to pay attention to when we're learning about it is, what if I'm not receiving? And what does that feel like? That feels like scarcity. That feels like lack. That feels like fear. That feels like anxiety. That's your cup not being filled. So that's contained within the duality of what we are learning about here, which is always very important when we're talking about later on in this episode, when this energy goes into detriment and how to fix it, okay? So that's all of the energy that's contained in the house, and that's our first building block. The second building block that you put on top of the house energy is the planetary rulership, which we mentioned is Venus, because we're going through this journey of polarity while we are building the zodiac wheel. So Venus, as we discussed in the episode with Libra, is how we receive. It is the energy of how we receive. How well are we receiving? How well are we not receiving? Do we have blockages? Do we not have blockages? Just break it down, take it out of the divine feminine, divine masculine gender assignments, because absolutely all people, all beings have divine masculine and divine feminine. We all are interacting with Mars energy and with Venus energy. So if we're deconstructing from the gendered assignments, which can lead to stereotypes, which can lead to bias, which can lead to unintentional, unconscious blockages just whenever we are learning information such as this, if our Mars energy is how we're doing, and it's projective, and it's energy flowing out and away from us, and we're learning Taurus right now, and Taurus is ruled by Venus, and the second house is ruled by Venus energy, and that's how we receive, and we're talking about how we fill our cup. So you see how important all of this is, to understand all of these rulerships as building blocks, because if our Venus energy is not, if we're not interacting with it well, and if we're not receiving well, what's tied to the Venus energy? What's tied to that ruler, that planetary rulership of Venus? Well, Venus is known to be associated with self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-care. Okay, caring for yourself. We're having this equal and opposite reaction to the Mars energy that came from the sign in the house that came before it. So that doing, where our purpose lives, and also our identity, if we don't feel confident in our identity, we can't have that self-love. We can't have that self-acceptance and that self-compassion. So we're moving from the first house to the second house, moving from Aries to Taurus, moving from Mars, moving to Venus, just in the construction of this zodiac wheel. Okay? So how we receive our external resources is entirely dependent upon what is going on in our personal energy and our relationship with this planetary rulership of Venus when it comes to Taurus. And we need to be open to receive, but we also need to be operating in confidence with our self-love, with our self-care, with our self-acceptance, with our self-compassion. And then that's how we are able to interact with and receive our abundance, right? So then the next building block that we're going to put on top of the planetary rulership of Venus is the element. So the element, which we have already discussed, is Earth. But what does that mean in this situation? Because this is receptive Earth energy. So this is energy that is flowing towards us under the element of Earth, which is deeply tied to our growth, but also our safety and our stability. So we're evoking the image of roots here. Okay, so it's like you have to be rooted, you have to be grounded in order to feel stable, in order to feel like you are able to grow in a sustainable way, which is deeply associated with the archetype of Taurus as an energy. As an energy, Taurus is literally ruling sustainability, and that is not growing too fast. That's another way that you can see the equal and opposite reaction from the sign that came before it, because Aries is very quick. It's fire energy. It can be seen as impulsive. They can be seen as doing things so quickly that they maybe don't even think about it before they do it, and then they have to accept some consequences of their actions that they didn't think about. So Taurus is watching that happen through Aries, and then they become the equal and opposite reaction to that, and they automatically slow down. And you really, really find that in the elemental rulership of Earth in particular, with Taurus energy and the second house, and also with Venus as well. You still find that in the planetary rulership, because Venus rules rest. Slow down. You need to rest in order to, you're not taking care of yourself. You're not engaging in self-care if you're not resting, if you're not rejuvenating, if you're not stopping and not doing. It's Venus's answer to Mars. Go, 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 go. Do, 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 do. Venus's answer is no, pull back, slow down, stop, go to sleep, take a nap. So that is found in this rulership with Taurus, and the earth element in particular is where you see what is going to withstand the test of time. What is sustainable versus not sustainable? What is going to grow forever and ever and ever and ever and ever? Taurus wants infinite growth if we can get it. And a lot of this world is obviously maybe not conducive to that. So this is where you get that Taurus might not be moving like at all in comparison to especially Aries, but other energies of the zodiac. And they need to be rooted in order to feel safe and secure. And if whatever they are doing is to fast, or, that is, they can talk about like the future, or think about the future in a way that is very, very different from other signs of the zodiac and other energies that are contained within the zodiac. It's kind of like this like long range vision that is contained within Taurus and the second house energy, because there's always this question of whatever is being done, whatever is going on, whatever we're trying to grow, whatever we're trying to do in this earth element energy, if it's not going to last, then there's this automatic pulling back, stoppage of motion, and actually, wait, no, maybe we should not do that way, is contained in this earth element. And then when you stack the next building block, which is going to be considered the mode, you actually still get that same spectrum of frequency and that same definition, because Taurus and the second house and this entire axis actually, and this is when we can talk about moving into the entire axis and how these energies are really rooted in each other, is the mode of being fixed. So the mode, there's only 3 modes in astrology. It's cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And sometimes when we're going back to learning astrology and that, it's 12 signs and everything is different, and how do I memorize all of this and how do I learn all of this? Mode in particular is why we should be learning astrology by axis, because if there's only 3 modes, that means that there are 4 signs that are assigned to each mode, and then that can feel overwhelming of how do I remember that? You can really cut it down and cut it in half by knowing that the entire axis, so this is Scorpio, is on the other end of the axis with Taurus, is the same exact mode. And you saw it with the Aries and Libra axis. Aries and Libra are both cardinal signs. So the entire axis is this cardinal starter energy. It's the beginning of every season. That's how you remember that. So both Aries and Libra were the beginning of spring and fall. They were both the spring and the fall equinoxes. So then you see it again in the next axis that you build the zodiac with. You see it with the mode being fixed through Taurus and Scorpio. But you also can see it with the polarity and the ancient rulership of Scorpio. A lot of people might not know that the ancient rulership of Scorpio was Mars. Now we know today the modern rulership of Scorpio as Pluto, but that was before we developed telescopes, and astrology and astronomy were actually really like the same word. They were a synonym. And also, to clarify, just in case it is not clear, I am talking about tropical astrology, and I am a tropical astrologer. And there are different kinds of astrology out there, so we can just take a little side note to mention that sidereal astrology and also Vedic astrology is different from tropical astrology. If you get your phone app out and you take it up and you look at where like the sun is in the sky, it is going to be in the last constellation previously from whatever season we are currently in, based in tropical astrology, because tropical astrology is actually literally based on the seasons. So it's worth mentioning that when I'm talking about the modes in particular and talking about those cardinal modes on the Aries and Libra axis that we learned first, being the start of the seasons, because that is how we really define and look at tropical astrology and what is going on. It does not take, it's called precession, into account, which as we float through the Milky Way galaxy, things are moving, things are changing. And back thousands of years ago, when we first invented astrology, we were looking at the constellations being physically where they were at the time. And then tropical astrology, things have changed over time, and it doesn't take that into account. So I just want to make that clear, just because people go viral all the time acting like they're debunking astrology. And it's like more like, congratulations, you just figured out the difference between sidereal and tropical astrology. You're a genius. Good for you, type of thing. Anyway, so back to the mode of Taurus and the second house. It's also how you see we are building this Mars and Venus polarity. It's just flipped on the other way, because we're starting with the second house, and Taurus is ruled by Venus. And then on the other end of the axis is Scorpio, was traditionally ruled by Mars. Okay. But the whole axis is the same mode, and it is a fixed sign. Both Taurus and Scorpio on both ends of the axis are fixed signs, the same way that Aries and Libra on their first axis were cardinal signs. And then when we get to the next axis that we're going to build, you're going to see that that's the Gemini Sagittarius axis. So once we get to those episodes, you will see that those are all that whole axis is mutable. Okay. So you don't have to work so hard to remember the mode. When it comes to fixed, what does fixed mean? Fixed modes. It is really the way that the energy wants to move, function, and operate. Okay. So when we were learning about cardinal modes on the Aries and Libra axis, it's still planetary rulerships of Mars and Venus. There's also still elemental rulerships between fire and air, but the modes are how these energies want to move mechanically to function. And when you apply the mode, it changes the way the element even functions. It changes the way the energy of the planet even functions, because we're still dealing with an axis that we're talking about here between Taurus and Scorpio that is Mars and Venus. It's different elements. It is earth and water that we are moving on to on this axis, but a fixed versus cardinal, because again, you're seeing this equal and opposite reaction as you're building these axes, as you're building this wheel. So because cardinal is starter energy and it's fast, it's the beginning of a season. Cardinal energy is good at moving forward, doing, starting new projects. It's that type of energy. It's quick. Okay. The answer to that is being fixed. And it's the different mode that comes right after it. And that is the energy of the stoppage of motion. It is the energy of the stoppage of movement even. And this is when we're talking about personality traits, when it comes to modes, you hear that fixed signs are stubborn, that Taurus and also Scorpio on the other end of the axis, they can be very stubborn. They can be very set in their ways. They can maybe not want to engage in change, or maybe they have like very deep rooted habits that are just really deep neural pathways that they cannot get out of those habits for them. They cannot change out of those habits. That is very indicative of fixed energy. That is what fixed energy looks like. So it's the answer. It's the answer to cardinal. It's the equal and opposite reaction to the cardinal energy. As you build the zodiac wheel, you will see that you move from cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable, because you are engaging in that equal and opposite reaction the entire time. So when we move from the fixed energy into mutable energy, the way that the mechanics of that energy works is that mutable is more go with the flow, because mutable looks at the fixed energy that came before it and becomes the equal and opposite reaction, that if you're not going to move and if you're going to be stubborn, I am going to be go with the flow. And then that go with the flow energy falls back into the equal and opposite reaction of it becomes cardinal, because instead of just being wishy-washy and go with the flow, now I'm going to be very decisive. It's like the cardinal energy is decisive. So learning the modes in particular, as you are learning each side of the zodiac through axis and building the zodiac wheel, will help you understand the way that these building blocks through the modes alone is how this energy mechanically functions. And then when you apply it even to the rulership of the planet, and talking about, let's say Venus is very different in Taurus energy than it is in Libra energy, because Libra is the cardinal mode when it comes to Venus. So that is very decisive in its reception. Taurus is less decisive in that reception. And there can be a lot more introspection because of that taking out of that forward motion of decisive of the cardinal energy and flipping it to fixed, just when you're analyzing how Venus is operating under Taurus, and it's taking out that stoppage of motion, and that it turns it a lot more internal, okay? Because you're switching that polarity from that cardinal mode and that forward motion, starting of a season, decisive, go do, blah, blah, blah. I'm good at starting projects and that kind of thing. And you're switching the polarity on that just when it comes to Venus and how we receive. Okay. So as we receive and it is fixed, this is where you get that self-care becoming indulgent. And this is contained in Taurus energy, and it's the energy of like luxury and indulgence and really, really like nice things. Because in order to experience indulgence, there really has to be this stoppage of motion and this moment in which you just feel and experience. And that is contained in that fixed mode that is on this axis, okay? So also the rooting of the polarity and Scorpio on the other end of the axis, because it's like we're doing Venus and Mars again. So the Taurus second house energy is external resources. And then on the other end of the axis, you get internal resources with Scorpio. And it's still fixed, but it's like, here's where you get this. It's like an axis of introspection is what you're looking at here. And Scorpio is the rulership of what is unseen and hidden and mysteries, and it's like in the 8th house. So it's rooted in the 2nd house with Taurus, and we graduate to that on the other end of the axis. And instead of it being external resources and the energy that exists outside of us, we then see internal resources and what is hidden, the mysteries, unseen, shared resources between people and things that it's like, marriage and stuff like that, or corporations, corporate money, things like that. And it's like not as visible on the surface of like what is going on between external energies that are more visible and tangible for observation that can be seen. And then that's where you get this projective polarity with that Mars rulership, because in order to discover what is not seen, you have to go find it. You have to seek and find it, right? So that requires projective energy to go out and away from you in order to see what is not being seen. And Scorpio is going to have that eagle-eyed precision of sight on the other end of the axis in order to go view what all of that is. And then also that can even be brought back like a net into the other end of the axis of the Taurus energy of what we receive, especially if we're tying it to the concept of money, just because it's easiest for people to understand that. And knowing that on the other end of the axis, the 8th house is ruling shared finances between people, whether that's marriage contract between people, or corporations, organizations, community, whatever that is. In order to receive that money, it's on the other end of the axis within Taurus and that reception. So do you see how it requires the polarity that is built, that plus and the minus on the battery, that equal and opposite reaction? If we're going from reception, we also require the projection in order for all of this energy to mechanically operate within itself. But it is the assignments of definition of what we are interacting with, like within this entire world, right? So the last building block when it comes to learning the house and the sign. So you started with, okay, where am I at? I'm on the second sign of the zodiac. I'm at Taurus. Okay, I'm at Taurus, and then I'm at the second house because I went from the first house to the second house. Okay, that makes sense. I understand all my rulerships for the second house. And then I put my planet on top of it, and I went from the first house was Mars, and the equal opposite reaction to that was Venus. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. Second house is ruled by Venus. And then I put my mode on top of it. Okay, it's fixed. Okay, that also, all of this is helping me understand the whole axis, because if the whole axis is the same and it's a fixed mode, that means Scorpio on the other end of the axis is also a fixed mode. But hey, also look at that. My planetary rulership helped me understand the other end of the axis, because Scorpio is also ruled by Mars. Before we invented telescopes and ancient astrology, everybody, okay, Scorpio was ruled by Mars. Got that. So then we talk about the symbol after that. So let's say you forget everything. Let's say you're in your process of your learning astrology, you slept, and you wake up and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't remember everything that I was trying to learn yesterday when it comes to all this astrology stuff. Okay, well, what's the symbol of Taurus? Because you can even get this out of your emoji keyboard. You can just go into the emoji keyboard and you can type Taurus, and it'll come up with the little emoji of the symbol of Taurus. And what is that symbol? It's a bull. It's a circle, and then it has two little horns coming up on top of it. So the symbol of Taurus is the bull. So what do we get out of the imagery? Just the image of the bull. Okay, well, bulls are definitely seen as stubborn. That's the first thing that might come to mind. Bulls are seen as stubborn. Well, there we go. We already got can we remember the mode rulership through that? Remember, we said that fixed energy tends to be stubborn and set in their ways. And it's also the stoppage of motion. It might not be easy to get a bull to move from one place to another. So see how just the symbol took us back to something that might be harder for us to remember. So this is why I always say, stack the symbol last. Stack the symbol as the last building block, because you can use the symbol as the imagery to evoke everything else that the sign of the zodiac rules. So also, bulls, we have these, I guess, do we call them games? You know, the bull riders, the matadors, and the things like that, and with like the red cape and everything. So a bull can also become aggressive, and they can become quick to anger. That is also found in traits of people with Taurus energy, but it's also found in the entire axis. People also see Scorpio at the other end of the axis. They can have a temper, or they can be very passionate or things like that. So even just on the other end of the axis through the symbol of the bull, it even takes us into some of the stuff and traits and energy that we get into the other end of the axis, because also, like I said right away, we got that fixed mode rulership again right out of the symbol, and we know that the entire axis is the same mode, right? So look at the symbol last, look at what that image evokes in your mind, and whatever that image evokes in your mind, it is going to take you straight back to everything that you learned when it comes to that sign of the zodiac, the house, but also the entire. It'll take you into the other end of the axis too, which is why we're learning by axis, is to help us all learn everything through this construction of polarity, the equal and opposite reaction, the plus and the minus on the battery, and the fact that these energies are truly rooted in each other. They cannot exist without the other. They're born and they operate within each other on both ends of the axis. And when we do the Scorpio episode by itself, we're going to see how we are taken to the other end of the axis within Taurus and that energy the entire time as well. So these building blocks just stacking on top of themselves, the sign of the zodiac first, then the house, then the planet, then the mode, then the symbol, you will be able to learn the entire thing, but not just that sign of the zodiac, the axis as a whole. Now we want to get into understanding the duality of the sign, and also like the axis as a whole, with these energies being rooted within each other and everything like that. But going back to how these pop astrology or mainstream astrology, whatever you want to call it, can put these stereotypes onto these energies. And these stereotypes, they will label certain things as a weakness and certain things as a strength. And really, these are creating unintentional, unconscious blockages and misunderstandings and bias that can take place within the understanding of the full picture of the signs of the zodiac and how they really function and operate, right? So what are some stereotypes of Taurus energy that you will read about? We're talking a lot about how Taurus can be stubborn, but we also, out of the symbol of the bull, we also heard that stereotype that Taurus energy can get suddenly aggressive. Taurus energy can have a temper. Taurus energy can suddenly be very, very quick to anger, and they can become the quote unquote bull in a china shop, right? That's a phrase that gets associated just with the symbol. And that may be true, but that is pop astrology, mainstream astrology, assigning these things as automatic like weaknesses and like not good traits. Because again, a human assignment of perspective, saying that something is good versus bad, is based on chosen and perceived information. When it comes to how you can view those traits as a strength, Taurus is associated with these external resources, which is associated with fulfillment, which is associated with how we are fulfilled, how we are secure, how we are safe. So when they are quick to anger, what can be going on out of that frequency spectrum of definition and energy is that safety and security might be at risk in some way. And that is what is really triggering that anger, is because this rulership of energy is designed to protect. It is designed to protect the resources, and that's found on the entire axis, y'all. It's like Scorpio is also a very protective energy as well, and that's also contained in the mode of fixed energy. This is going to be a lot of energy of protection. So if the resources are going to become at risk in some way, or if something is not seen as sustainable in some way, that Taurus energy is going to automatically become triggered because it's their job out of the zodiac to teach what is sustainable, what can grow, what can withstand the test of time. So if the resource, any sort of resource, the example that we can use with this can even just be in an interpersonal relationship. And if somebody is doing or saying something that is going to hurt the relationship in some way, and then the relationship is going to become unsustainable in some way, that Taurus energy is going to become quick to anger and it can become aggressive in order to be like, hey, no, we need to protect the sustainability of this relationship. You are making moves that are going to cause this relationship to fall apart and become unsustainable. And if the relationship itself is also seen as an external resource because you two are filling each other's cup up and you two are fulfilling each other, if all of a sudden that fulfillment is taken away in some way, whether that's emotional, something is happening, this is very, very conceptual, just whatever we are imagining right now. If that is taken away as a resource in the relationship, then Taurus is automatically going to get triggered, right? Okay, so it just depends, it takes an assignment of perspective of, do we really view that as a weakness or do we view that as a strength? So whenever the energy goes into detriment or goes into dissonance, really for Taurus energy, that's because they will be experiencing some kind of scarcity or lack. That is going to be when Taurus and second house energy and also Venus energy goes into dissonance. And we are living in a world where we are just like trying to seek resonance at all times. And then that's when the personality traits, when a person has heavy placements. And what do I mean by heavy placements? So there's kind of like 6 definitions of heavy placements because it can be your interplanetary placements. So that's Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars. That's your most inner energy that people are really going to perceive and get from you more immediately, but also the ascendant. So if you have a Taurus ascendant on your birth chart as well. So when Taurus energy is not grounded and not functioning, what does that look like? That looks like there's a lack of self-care, but then also that temper can be coming out. The aggression can be coming out. There's a lack of self-love, but there's also the lack of indulgence. So do you see me saying lack over and over and over and over again? Because of this is that energy of external resources and also growth and sustainability that is found in this frequency spectrum. So when Taurus energy goes into detriment, it's because quite literally there is some kind of energy of lack that is taking place. It's lack, it's scarcity. There's something going on with the abundance. There is a sieve in the cup. The cup is not being fulfilled. The fulfillment is not taking place. And that is when Taurus energy is going to need to become grounded. And the best way that we can ground all energy through all signs of the zodiac is actually in the other end of the axis. So that means that Taurus is going to need to then go do something, because the other end of the axis has Mars is the planetary rulership. So if we're struggling over here in the second house with Taurus and with Venus energy, the answer to that energy and the grounding of the polarity of that energy is to interact with Mars energy, but also to interact with what Taurus needs. So they're going to need to go do something, and likely something indulgent. They're going to need to go get a really nice dessert possibly and eat it. That's an action. Just like go do it. It's very, very simple. It's like you don't have to take a luxury vacation. That's an option if you want to go do and take a luxury vacation in order to really ground in your Taurus and Venus energy. That would be great, but maybe we also don't have the external resources to be able to do that, right? But also what they're really going to need to do is engage in their shadow side, because that is Scorpio. And that's on the other end of the axis. And they need to take this projective energy to really dive deep into the depths, okay? So it's like we've got Mars, which is the action of doing, but we also have to understand what the rulerships are on the other end of the axis when it comes to grounding, when the energy goes into detriment. So Scorpio rules the hidden, the unseen, the mysteries, and also internal resources. So internal resources include understanding ourselves and our psyche and our soul and our personality and everything at the deepest possible level, our ego, all these layers, the layers of the self. And Scorpio also rules like transformation and transmutation. So when Taurus energy is on their end of the axis and they are functioning in scarcity and they're functioning in lack, they're functioning in fear, this is also an axis of fear and trauma. There can be a lot of trauma energy on all sides of the, like both ends of this axis. Taurus can be experiencing a lot of trauma because that can then mess with how we receive. Trauma is automatically a blockage. So then that messes with our Venus energy and that messes with how we're able to receive and fill our cup and get these external resources for what we've come down here to do in this earth plane. In order to figure that out and how we are not receiving, in order to figure out what those blockages are, figure out our trauma, that takes place on the other end of the axis within Scorpio. So we have to engage with our trauma, engage with our shadow side, engage with the dark things that we have gone through, because Scorpio rules these dark, hidden, unseen mysteries, the depths of your soul and all of that. And then we have to transform it and we have to transmute it. We have to wade through the tar. We have to wade through the pain of whatever we went through that then created this detriment. We're living in the fear, the scarcity, and the lack. And then we have to transmute it and transform it into the opposite of that. And that takes the other end of the axis. It takes Scorpio in order to do that. And so it's an incredibly healing axis when you really look at it that way, that in order to be operating really, really well in our Taurus energy and our second house energy, because like I said, whether you have Taurus placements or not, we are all interacting with all 12 signs of the zodiac. This is just life. We're just moving through life. And we're also generating our own reality. And we have to remember that. And we have to remember that it's all based in our personal frequency as well. So when we're in this second house of money and also Taurus and sustainability and abundance and all of the things that we need in order to fulfill our cup and receive that energy of fulfillment. So we want to be experiencing joy, happiness, gratitude, all of the nice things in the second house, the external resources that we need to receive in order to feel good, in order to really receive those things and exist in flow state in all times. We have to understand the shadows and we have to understand the deepest part of ourselves. And we don't even reach that self-love and self-acceptance and self-compassion that we have to have within that Venus energy on this side of the axis until we go explore the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves that we may not even like. And really, the transmutation and the acceptance in order to reach the resonance within Venus, in order to receive and love ourselves and accept ourselves and have that self-confidence and self-acceptance and patience, we have to understand and see on the other end of the axis what we don't even want to accept about ourselves, because it's not about becoming perfect. And it's not about changing our flaws. It's not about eliminating our flaws. It's about the acceptance of our flaws and our wounds and our trauma and all of the things that make up our baggage, right? That we don't even want to show other people, which is on the other end of the axis within Scorpio. It's the internal stuff, the things that we don't want to see. But remember, it's this axis of resources. So even the things that we don't like about ourselves are still a resource, because all energy is a tool and all energy is a gift. And whatever it is, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us, no matter how much we don't like it, we are meant to use that energy for our growth, for learning our lessons, for rising to the occasion and facing our challenges and overcoming our challenges. And maybe it's the things that we don't even like about ourselves or are our darkest, deepest parts of ourselves that can become our greatest strengths and our greatest superpowers. And we don't get to that until we get on the other end of the axis with Scorpio, but it comes back to this axis, this side of the axis within Taurus and Venus, and the external resources and how we receive. So we have to understand and interact with whatever the hidden internal resources are first and take that back onto the other end of the axis here. And then that's really how we start to excel down here in the human experience. Because if we do not face our trauma and our wounds and the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, well, then our energetic system is just filled with all of these blockages, and our Venus energy just can't even function in the way that we are supposed to receive, the way that we are supposed to fill up our cup just does not work. And it is just in total detriment. And this axis is the governance of absolutely all of that. So I think these episodes are going to be really, really important on, these first axes that we are building between Aries and Libra and Scorpio and, Taurus and Scorpio on this side of the axis. So make sure that you stay tuned for the Scorpio episode so that we can talk about this axis as a whole and how all of the Taurus energy is going to be rooted in the discovery of the Scorpio and the polarity of the Scorpio when we talk about this axis as a whole. I think that's pretty good. And we are coming to the end of this episode and everything that we needed to really talk about today. And you need to make sure that you are subscribed, I think you get like little notifications to find out that I have released new episodes of this limited 12 series, release new episodes of the 12 signs of the Zodiac for this limited podcast series. And it is, just a heads up, going to be a total of 13 episodes, because as you can see, as I'm talking about each of these axes, but also moving from one house to the next and talking about the polarity, the equal and opposite reaction, the plus and the minus on the battery, we are constructing a full circle here with the Zodiac wheel. And I think it is beneficial that we have one episode by itself, just kind of talking about the energy and frequency of the entire Zodiac wheel and the construction of the entire Zodiac wheel through polarity and frequency as well. So you can also connect with me on other social media platforms. If you happen to be watching this video, then you can, like and subscribe on YouTube, but obviously I'm Brie Rhiannon here. I'm Brie Rhiannon on all platforms. And also my website is BrieRhiannon.com. So it's Brie like the cheese, Brie, and then Rhiannon, like the Fleetwood Mac song. If you're only listening to the audio and you need to know how to spell it, so Rhiannon. I am also the most active on Facebook and Threads in particular because I am a writer. I am working on my first book, which is also the title of my Facebook group. It is called Lunar Revolution. So if you are seeking community and like-minded people that are just like you, that are also spiritual and learning about astrology and all of these things, you can find our Facebook group and interact with us. And that's also where I put a lot of my science-y content. I tend to share a lot of very nerdy things in there, full-blown studies, PDFs of studies. We're talking about how those things connect to spirituality. So if you like to learn things like neuroscience and cardiology and how the human and brain system works, because we are just based in frequency, and the way that reality generation works, where we're just projecting the frequency out and away from us, and then that's the frequency that comes towards us, which is also what we are putting into the building blocks of astrology. My Facebook group is a really, really great place for that and where those discussions are happening. And yeah, I'm on all platforms as the same name. So I thank you so much for being here and for listening. I appreciate it more than you guys know. Also, you can book with me. I do one-on-one sessions with people. I have, custom containers if we want to do long-term work. A really, really popular thing with me is a year-long program, a year-long package working with me on a regular basis. I'm doing energy work on you, and it's a lot of learning and just a layered onion, and we just do a deep dive on wherever your baseline is and where you want to go, and we just work together for the next year. So you guys can find me on my website. You can book things like a spiritual discovery call, a full session, just typed up energy work. I do all kinds of things and all kinds of stuff. I even do pet readings. Just to remind people, I am a regular psychic medium. So also if you want to talk to a loved one that has passed on, a pet that has passed on, really, everything is just energy, and I simply just read energy. That is all. And I explain things through energy as well. So I would absolutely love to be working with people one-on-one if I get to meet you face-to-face through the wonderful modern technology and a video call. I would absolutely love to do that with you. If we get to do prolonged work, I would love to do that too. If all we do is even connect on socials, I would just love to connect with my audience. And I'm really happy to be doing this and really happy that you guys are listening. And I hope everybody is learning astrology in a new way that is easier for you to learn, feels less daunting, and helps you know that this is not as hard as you think it is. And it's easier to remember. It's all related, and it's all big, deep parts of your life and your own energy. And then you can learn how to operate in flow state and navigate this human experience in a much better way than you may have been navigating it before, which is what it is all about. Because taking it back to Taurus and the second house, this is about fulfillment, and we need to be fulfilled in our human experience. And everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves to feel fulfilled, and everybody deserves to experience abundance, and remembering that abundance is more than just money through Taurus in the second house. And I hope that learning about it, and also the entire axis and how you can just navigate better in this energy, was helpful for you. Stay tuned for my next episodes that are coming up, and connect with me wherever you want to connect with me. Book with me if you want to book with me. And thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.